Hi everyone, welcome. Just waiting for everybody to come in and then we'll make a start. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Ask Me Anything session for the first Velocity programme of 2022, starting in March. I'm Abby, the events coordinator for the Melbourne Entrepreneurial Centre, and I will be your host this afternoon. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the country from where I'm speaking today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. And wherever you may be around Victoria and across Australia, I do encourage you to reflect on the traditional custodians of the land on which you're on. So about today, this Ask Me Anything session will give you an opportunity to hear what Velocity is like from two founders who have recently been through the programme. Today, we are joined by Jeddi Kyne and Jack Whelan, who were both part of the second Velocity programme of 2021. And to start off the session, we'll share some information about Velocity to help you with your application, and then we'll open it up to the audience and kick off question time, which is what you're all here for. So just before we begin, just in terms of housekeeping, please keep your microphones on mute unless you're speaking, and please do be aware that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our MAP YouTube page later. I would like to now give a warm welcome to our Velocity Programme Manager, Rory McNeice, who will give you a rundown of Velocity and how to apply. Thanks, Rory.
Thanks, Abby, and welcome everyone. Just give me one moment while I share the right screen. How's that? We see a nice starry background? Excellent. Well, yes, welcome to the first of our AMA sessions for the Velocity program for 2022. I'm Rory, I'm the Velocity Program Manager, new to the role this year and excited to get stuck into the program and help you guys out in terms of getting some startups off the ground. So we're here to find out today everything you need to know for applying for the program. Very quick agenda for what I'm going to be presenting. First, an introduction to MAP and the Accelerator Program, introduction to Velocity and how that fits into MAP, some advice for application preparation, and then, of course, we'll be jumping across to hear from Jack and Jeddi around their stories and move to some questions at the end. So most of you are probably familiar with MAP, been around for 10 years now, supported over 160 startups in helping them raise over $100 million in investment and generate $120 million in revenue, 1,400 jobs. All sorts of different companies, from renewable batteries to solar panels on roofs to personalized radio to virtual reality, you name it, all sorts of different things. It's been a really exciting journey for the university to be able to support some of our alumni and staff through these exciting ventures. And very successful program that we're really proud of. So a couple of years back, we realized that as much as we're really happy with what the Accelerator program is doing, there was a bit of a gap in the market around very early stage founders and trying to make sure that we were providing the kind of support that people need to get their companies from that first point of concept through to really understanding who their early market customers were, getting out and reaching them, engaging with them, and trying to build relationships with those customers in order to try and solve the real problems that they're facing. So what we do, why we exist is basically to support I'm doing well, I can read, early stage, high potential founders. And this year in particular, we're very delighted to have the support of LaunchVic, which is the Victorian startup body funding the program and helping us support all of you. So over the couple of years it's been around, Velocity's supported over 190 founders, 100 startups. About 50% have been in emerging technologies, but there's been a wide range of startups involved. Where the Accelerator program has historically been a bit more technology focused, Velocity is a bit of a broader focus on anyone who's starting a business. So in terms of the emerging technology we've had medtech, AI, machine learning, robotics, micromanufacturing, you name it. And we're very happy to say that over 60% of those startups that have come through Velocity are actually still operating. And we're actually quietly, one of the things that I'm pretty happy with is even with those 40%, that's not because it was all a disaster. In most cases, it's because talking through with those founders and those businesses, we realized that that particular thing wasn't going to work out, but we've been able to help those founders develop the skills and knowledge to be able to move on to the next venture. So a big part of why Velocity exists is to be a pathway to acceleration across Victoria and around the world. So obviously there's a direct pathway through to our own accelerator program, and that's the original basis behind Velocity. But we've been very happy to see that companies and founders that have come through Velocity have moved on to all sorts of accelerators around Victoria, Australia, and even around the world in some cases, to take their products and their services and their startups and grow them further beyond the point that they reach at the end of Velocity. So we're really happy with how all these companies have been able to grow through Velocity and set themselves up with a really good foundation for their future. Velocity companies have raised about $9 million in funding, $6.5 million in revenue, and created about 200 jobs, which again, for the early stage that they're at, we're really happy with those numbers, and it's really exciting to see them growing and those numbers going up over time as more companies come through and move on to a more mature stage. And we're also really happy with the diversity that we've had through Velocity and the Velocity program. So 52% of companies that have come through Velocity have been female founded, and 48% have been impact focused. So we're delighted to see that we're out there actually making a difference in the world. So what's the point of Velocity? As I was saying before, we help founders speed up their search for product, problem, solution, fit, and discover first customers. It's very much about finding compelling concepts that show clear potential for scale and impact, and mostly using new technology. But we do this primarily through structured workshops. And of course, where the real value is, mentoring from entrepreneurs and experts, and becoming a lifetime App alumni. Because if we're being honest, most of the content around how to start a business, you can find it on YouTube for free. So the real value that we provide here in Velocity is in trying to build those relationships between you as a founder, the other founders in your cohort, and also relationships between you and our existing pool of mentors and our existing alumni that have come through both Velocity and the Melbourne Accelerator Program. Quick overview of what the program looks like for the first cohort this year, 24th of March through to the 9th of June. Workshops are Thursday evenings from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. There's mentoring, there's a Velocity showcase at the end, I think on the 8th of June, not the 9th of June. The 9th is sort of a follow-up wrap session. And of course, there's a membership with the MAP alumni community and networking within the MAP community. This is still a little bit of a work in progress. This is the program structure from last year, possibly the year before as well. But obviously, I'm doing what everybody does when they start a new role, and I'm getting in there and playing around with things and rearranging things. But this is a pretty good example of the structure of the course and most of the things that will be covered. So very much around identifying who your customers are to begin with, really understanding what their problems are, positioning yourself for growth, making sure that you've built the right team, looking at where you fit into broader systems and system mapping, understanding that you've how to refine and build your product. Great question in the chat. I'll come back to that as we move on to the bit about application advice. So fundraising, pitching, all of these very fundamental skills that are essential to getting an early stage company off the ground. So the application process looks a bit like this. We have online applications open now and they close on the 27th of February. We'll move through into an interview stage after that to sort out who we think are the best candidates for the program. And a big part of that is making sure that we're actually able to help you. So to Shuai's question in the chat, in terms of how ready you need to be, we're not expecting you to have solved everything. I mean, the whole point of this is that it's for early stage founders and early stage companies. But we do hope that you're at a stage that's a bit beyond just, I've got an idea and I'd like to know. But this is usually for people who have got some idea around either the product or the market or the customer, and have that feeling of like, I know there's something here, but I'm not quite sure exactly how I would need to go about it to make sure that we really answer those questions that these customers have and really make sure that we're building a solution for them. So Also, feel free to book in office hours with me to chat about it more if you'd like to. There'll be a link later on. So final cohort will be announced on the 11th of March, and the program will begin on the 24th of March, running through to the 9th of June. The application is 3 main sections. So obviously there's eligibility details, which are just very basic questions about, what's your startup, where are you based, a lot of those kinds of questions. There's founder details, which are about who's the founders, who's participating in the program. And of course, then there's the meat of the application is the startup details of 3-minute pitch, which is a lot more questions around things like this. What's the problem that you're trying to solve? What's your solution? Who's your target market? Who's already in your team? Why is this the right time to solve this problem? Have you had any traction? What do you think your business model is? And how can we help? So those are the kinds of questions that you'll find in that startup details section. In terms of the pitch structure for the 3-minute pitch as part of the application, there's a suggested pitch format. Obviously, suggested means that you can pitch it however you'd like, but we'd strongly encourage you to follow this kind of a pathway in terms of having a quick introduction to who are you, what's the company, what are you trying to do, what's the problem that you're trying to solve, how do you think you can solve that problem, what's the market for that problem, who's it really going to help, and in terms of who it's going to help those people, how's it going to become a sustainable business based on that? What traction do you have in terms of, have you had customers already coming and potentially saying, yeah, we'll pay for this, or do you have interviews that you've done where people have given you some feedback and said, yes, we're interested in pursuing this path? Who's the team? So what skills do they have? What do they know about this area? Why are they experienced, or not necessarily experts, but what gives you a competitive advantage as a team? And then what's next in terms of what do you see as the next 6 to 12 months of this startup's life cycle? In terms of the question around, do you need to be a Melbourne University student? No. There's no requirement for Velocity that you be a Melbourne University student. We will take anyone and everyone. Of course, there's a competitive application process, so we'll compare you to the other applicants, and we'll take the best and most suitable picks through that. But no, there's no requirement to be affiliated with the university. In terms of preparing your pitch, get lots of feedback. Watch a whole lot of pitches. There's a library of them at our website, themap.co/library. Practice and collect feedback from different people, get their opinions, get their feedback. And don't take people's opinions and feedbacks as personal attacks. It's always great to ask people, what do they think? And when someone gives you some honest feedback and you think, oh, that feels a little uncomfortable to me, that's always a really good sign that feedback is something that is worth focusing on and worth getting a really good understanding of. Some tips for the interview stage. Of course, come prepared. Again, admitting that early stage companies, early stage founders, you won't necessarily have answers to all of these questions, but in terms of the guidelines of the things that you should be thinking about and saying, even if you don't have case studies, for example, and you don't have particular metrics about what you're looking for, if you have an idea about where you'd like to go and what sort of a case study you'd like to develop, those are the kinds of examples that you could have if you don't immediately have one. Of course, keep responses concise because interviews will be relatively short. Try and demonstrate some momentum and some interest in terms of where you're going and what your plan is. If you have a team that's speaking in the interviews, make sure that you understand who's going to present about which parts and who to defer to on different questions. Nothing worse than having people go back and forth between each other for 5 minutes, and it's a waste of their time, it's a waste of the interviewer's time when you could be presenting more information about the startup. Of course, keep it real. If you don't know, you don't know. We're not your boss. We're not your professor. We're not here to mark you and grade you. If you genuinely don't know something, the best thing you can do is tell us and say, we don't know that, but we'd like to find out, because then we can understand where we can help you find that out as part of the program. Final bits of advice, I suppose, focus on building a great startup. Of course, we'd love to have you apply to Velocity. We'd love to see your companies come through, but a lot can happen between now and then. And make sure that you're still actually working on this startup idea. So we wouldn't want you to stumble on the startup because you're too busy focusing on this application. Of course, though, still submit the application. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out for office hours or reach out to me. the link will be in the slides, and Abby, I believe we're going to be sending the slides around afterwards. Yes, great. Yeah, other than that, I will pass back to Abby. Thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing your applications.
Thanks for that, Rory. I'd now like to welcome our guests. We've got Jeddi and Jack. Thanks so much for joining us. Jeddi, please can you start off by telling us about Wadoo?
Sure. Hey everyone. Firstly, yeah, welcome, and super cool to see all of you and all you guys like interested in applying for this program. It's an exciting program, and obviously I'll tell you more about that. But yeah, I'm from a team called Wadoo, made up of 4 co-founders. Which kind of stemmed from a competition earlier last year looking at how do we bring back people into the Melbourne CBD in kind of this post-pandemic environment. So that's where Wadoo kind of stemmed from, and it's actually slang for what to do. So me and my co-founders, or actually most of us, met online through gaming, and there was often times throughout the entire 2 years of COVID where we were like, hey, what do you want to do? What to do? And it kind of just got to the point where we just cutting it short. It was like, all right, Wadoo. And I think that's kind of what built anyway this name, and you'll then understand in terms of what we're about, how we kind of came up with the idea. But ultimately, we were just thinking, coming out of COVID, we had a lot of plans. There were times where, oh yeah, man, I really wanted to go to this musical. I wanted to watch the show. And then all of a sudden you hear the news and it's like, all right, we're in lockdown. You can't do anything. And then so coming out of that, we were like, how do people find out, when their plans are going to be cancelled? How do they even find out what's actually happening? And so we were thinking, how can we get information to people at the right time and when they need it most? And so that's ultimately what we were trying to solve for. And so Wadoo, in short, is ultimately a mobile app as a starting point that helps you rediscover your city. But not only that, we want to help you rediscover your city in a unique and fun way. And so I want you to kind of think events and missions, and by you completing these missions, you're kind of encouraged to explore what's happening around you. And then you also have the option to explore, hey, 1 block away from me, this event's happening, and it helps you make that decision to be like, oh, instead of going home, maybe I'll actually go and attend this event. And that's ultimately the approach that we're taking.
Great, thank you. And Jack, could you please tell us about Supa?
Yep. Welcome everyone. I'm Jack Whelan, co-founder of Supa, along with Sasha, who's actually over in London at the moment. He's based in London. But we're on a mission to make superannuation simple. So Supa will be the first independent and totally transparent superannuation management tool, allowing users to save up to $600,000, but also allowing them to clearly understand the impact that their financial footprint has on the environment. So the best way to think of us is like a stocks and shares account for your super. You can input your preferences in order to display the top performing products, breaking down investment strategies and with independent and verified research on ESG factors so that you can take control with one simple tool. And that's Supa in a nutshell.
Brilliant. Thank you both. They were great introductions. So now I'll just start off by asking both of our guests a couple of questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. So if you do have any questions, you feel free to pop them in the chat box now, or you can wait till later and then just take yourself off mute and ask the questions yourself. Okay. So Jeddi, what was your experience like with Velocity, and how did the program help with your startup journey?
So for me, the Velocity program was super invaluable. I think both as someone who's pretty new to this whole startup scene, but then also from a personal kind of development level. I've always thought as myself as being one to love coming up with ideas, but then it's always easy to be okay, you have all these ideas, now what do you do with it? And what's the approach that you take? And I think what the Velocity program does really well is really provide you a structured 11, 12 weeks of providing you with themes and topics that you might have never kind of heard of. So for example, I came across business model canvas, a value proposition canvas, and those are things that I got introduced to through the program. And I don't think I probably would have thought about any of those things prior to that. and as well as you get introduced to like understanding the importance of a team structure as part of a startup. And sometimes you're like, oh no, like it's just me and a bunch of friends, but then understanding how important it is to get that right early on is something that we got exposed to, and then obviously some legal considerations as well. So how that's fed into our current startup journey as well, it's really laid the foundation of the approaches that we're taking. I think it's really kind of paved the way for us to be like, hey, okay, this is the step we're going to take. You know, this is what's coming up next. Let's like, you know, get this out of the way. Let's make sure we have those consultations when we need it. Let's go through our customer validation process and, you know, make sure that we kind of don't waste time as we go. And so it's really helped us progress in that way. But outside of, I guess, the workshops and like the structure that it provides, really and honestly, like what's most valuable is really the people that you get to meet. And I guess, you know, I could say it's cliche, but it really is like the people, like the guest speakers that come along, the mentors that you get access to, and then most importantly as well, the cohort. So, you know, the people that you're applying with, the chances are you might see a good portion of them, right? And you'll be journeying along with them. And I think keeping those connections in the long run will be really, really important.
Wonderful, thank you. And what about you, Jack? What was your experience like, and how did the program help with your journey?
Yeah, just following on from Jeddi, and I reiterate a lot of those points that he's made there. I thought the MAP program was fantastic. I've done another similar program as well with another accelerator, and I think one thing that really stands out for me with MAP is the sessions are a little bit longer, and I think that means that you have to sort of commit your time and actually be just commit to the program. And that means that everyone that's involved in the cohort is a lot more engaged and driven to get results out of it. So all the sessions provide, you know, the longer length of the sessions allows, you know, Rory and the team to go into much more detail rather than just brushing over it, which I think is super valuable because, you know, sometimes, like Rory alluded to, there's a lot of information out there around how you can, like the startup playbook, but really drilling down into certain bits of that and how it applies to your business and chatting to everyone in the cohort really gives you a bit more clarity on which bits apply to your business, and that, you know, you can take some and leave some and figure that out. So I think that's valuable. And then, yeah, like reiterating Jeddi's point again, like the networks and the connections that you make through the university, the MAP team are like fantastic at helping to introduce you to people that are going to really help you take that next step and get honest feedback on what you're trying to do as well. And that does carry on, like they alluded to the MAP alumni, but, you know, I've felt that they really are supporting you once the course finishes as well, which is fantastic.
Right, thanks, Jack. And just another question for you. Could you tell us how you found the recruitment process?
Yeah, I was having to think back to when I applied a little bit, but I thought it was a really smooth process, and importantly for me, there was really good communication from the university, and that, you know, throughout that process. So even just getting updates on when decisions were going to be made. I didn't think the application form was overkill. I've done, you know, depends where you're at with your journey, but you apply to, you know, to VC companies and all sorts of stuff, and you end up doing quite a few of these. I thought it was well structured, and like you do have to put a little bit of work into it, but it's like valuable work. You know, if you can't answer some of these questions, then you probably need to be having a little think about just where you're at in the business model. And that's not to say that you shouldn't apply, but it helps you articulate it and really understand what your business is. The interview process, like the actual face-to-face interview over Skype, over Zoom, was a little bit more of an unknown. I don't know if I actually jumped on one of these calls, but yeah, I just made sure that I was quite, just got across my enthusiasm for the project, really, and didn't stress too much. I think sometimes you can go into like interview situations and try and prepare loads of stuff, and you end up a bit stuck, like if they don't ask the perfect question for you. So just be confident that you know you know your business, and like Rory mentioned, they're not trying to they're not grading you. It's not like a high school exam or anything like that. They just want to help you along the journey, so don't stress about it too much.
Thank you for that. And then also just following on, how did you prepare for your 3-minute video pitch, Jack?
The one thing I wrote down on this was that I always try and stick to the framework that people give you on this. So if you've done another show pitch video, like don't try and hash it, like answer the questions that the map team sort of lay out in front of you. And then, yeah, pretty much what Rory said, really. I do like a really rough copy, just write it out as I would say it, in my strong Northern English accent. And and then bounce it off a few people, get some feedback. I do remember that what we did was had like a very rough and ready PowerPoint presentation on a Zoom screen, and then just recorded it. So I don't think, it doesn't need to be anything spectacular in terms of the obviously, if you can make something look fantastic, then by all means. But I didn't stress too much about making it look like the most amazing thing, and just made sure the content was right and that it fit into the time frame, because that's what they're after, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a question for both of you guys. What was the most valuable thing that you learned during Velocity?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, sure. So like I mentioned, I guess from where we came on in terms of like from a competition, then kind of taking like from an idea into like a startup journey, trying to stray away from what we were initially trying to solve for the purpose of that competition to actually trying to solve for a real problem, and for people was a bit of a challenge. And so during Velocity, I know some of one of the workshops is around like customer discovery and like validation, really understanding your customer. And I think Rory, it says in the slide, like one of the main things is like problem solution fit. And so early on and throughout the program, we were kind of challenged by a mentor to really get to know our customer. We went out and did face-to-face interviews over Zoom, just reached out to people, just put it on like our social platforms, just being like, hey, is anyone interested? This is like a rough idea. This is what we're trying to achieve. Would you like to have a chat? And from talking to these people, we kind of understood that the people that we're initially targeting was quite broad. So let's say we were targeting like young professionals, like uni students who loved hanging around the city. By doing those interviews, we're able to kind of narrow it down to be like, hey, we didn't actually know, but in kind of like every group or social setting, there's always like a planner, and there's always like people who just tag along. And it might be one of yourselves in terms of like, are you the person who actually goes out and looks at like, what do you want to do? Or are you the one that is just like, hey, does anyone want to do this? And then you're just like, oh yeah, I'll come along. And that was just something we wouldn't have discovered or known about unless we actually, talked to the customer. And then even from there, we're understanding, okay, what is the actual problem that you have? Well, it's the decision-making process. It's like, there's so many resources out there, but a lot of them are interpersonal, in terms of like, they don't really relate to me. Some of the ads that I see on Facebook are just like irrelevant, or during that specific time that I am looking for an event, it's just like, well, it's not the right timing. It's still like a couple of weeks away. And that kind of information and that understanding, really stemmed from those workshops around customers and understanding, okay, this, now that you understand who your customers are and what the problem is that they have, then how are you going to come up with a solution that meets that? And that really kind of helped us pivot, not in a huge way, but it did help us reconsider, the steps that we're going to take to actually coming out with our end goal. And so out of that, really, it's just like, get to know your customers, understand what their problems are as early as possible, because I think they'll save you so much time and so much resources later down the track. And it really feeds into a lot of the steps that you'll take as part of your journey, in terms of, okay, who are your customers? Like, a lot of people ask you, who are your customers? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And then I think that will feed in really well as your journey.
Yeah, for me, I think there was like so many takeaways, like just putting out, like, the pitch night was fantastic, and I think Jeddi alluded to it before, like a really good personal development opportunity, you know, getting up on the stage and, you know, pitching to people. So there's loads of great things and takeaways from fundraising to business strategy. Really, really helpful. I think the one thing for me is that there is this, and you kind of get this throughout the whole course, but there is a startup playbook, and whether you like it or not, a lot of the businesses or startup businesses tend to follow that process. But where I think Matt helped clarify a few things was that they get alumni that have come through the program and gone on and built successful businesses, and you see that they all followed this general process, but they all tackled these challenges in slightly different ways and at different times. And I think it's sometimes you can look at the whole process of trying to figure out your product market fit and all these various challenges and get a little bit hamstrung on it. And I think it just made me realize that you'll develop through that process and you'll tackle all these things and you'll know exactly what you need to do when you hit them. But it's different for every business, and I think it was an eye-opening thing for me. And I think that's the one thing I got out of it was the stories from other founders around their journey and like just how different characters run businesses as well. Like it's just it's insights that you can't get unless unless you get involved in a program like this. So that was fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So just before we move on to questions from the audience, do either of you guys have any advice for the other founders in the room who are interested in joining the program?
Yeah, I definitely do have advice. I guess like once you get into the program, but really, as cliche as it sounds, it's like it is what you make of it. I think MAP really does a good job in providing you the framework, the structure, the people, the mentors. But at the end of the day, I think it's probably on you to see how much do you want to absorb, how much do you want to actually apply. And so really encourage you to lean into if it's structures assuming the same, into your group of peers that you get allocated to, set goals together, keep each other accountable. And I think that's really key because you see them week by week, like ask each other how you guys going, how you guys tracking, how can I help, and lean into their networks as well. One advice that I remember specifically from like day one as part of the workshop was like, don't compare yourself or your startup to others. And I think that's really important. It's really important to understand that we're all on separate startup journeys, and everyone's, for example, mine was just like my team and I is really just like an early stage idea. Some people are well developed into their journey. They just need a bit more assistance. But looking back, don't get stuck in being like, oh man, they're already at this kind of stage. They're already like earning money. They have paying customers, and you're just like here still coming up with like a solution to the problem, because it is a trap. And I think it doesn't do you any good. If anything, look up to them and be like, hey, how did you get to this point where you are? I think will be really important. Be willing to take risks. Don't be afraid to like reach out to people, to customers especially. I think for me, for the longest time, I was always hesitant. I'll be like, oh, I don't want to consume someone's time. I just don't want to ask like a silly question or anything. But the funny thing is, I think, and hopefully like a lot of you agree, is that people actually really enjoy talking about themselves. And so give them that space and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to share. But then lastly, ultimately have fun. It is just like a learning experience. You have nothing to lose. You have so much to gain. And whether you're doing it by yourself or with like someone else or a big team, celebrate the wins no matter how big or how small. Let's say you got one interview, celebrate that. The fact that you managed to talk to one person and then just grow from there.
Yeah, I'd just reiterate that and said, like, you've really just got to get stuck in. If you get into if you're in the program, the more you give, with the entire cohort, the better the experience is. And if you're a bit unsure, like even just taking it back to the application process, if you're a little bit unsure, I would really recommend you just tackle that as a task in itself. And like thinking back to when I first started with Super, like I sent off quite a few application processes to various accelerators, and you get knocked back from some and you get into others, and but one thing you do get out of every single one is, it's a learning process, and you realize the areas that you potentially need to work on or develop a little bit. So yeah, just give it a go. It is a fantastic course in my opinion. So yeah, if you're looking for someone to help develop your startup forward, then I think that's a perfect place to start.
Fantastic. Thank you both. There were some really good pieces of advice, and it's great to have your insights. I think this is a really good time to take some audience questions. So as I mentioned before, we are an intimate group today. So if you have a question, just take yourself off mute and you can ask our speakers the question, or if you prefer, you can just write it in the chat and I will ask it for you. I can see that we've actually got one already, which would be one for Rory. Does the business have to be unique and innovative to be eligible?
So you can tell that I have a law degree because my answer is it depends. And the reason I say that it depends is that almost every startup business has something about it that's unique and innovative. But I suppose what we're looking for here is it doesn't have to be the first time that anybody has tried to tackle a particular problem. But what we do like to see is where you're trying to tackle it from a different angle. So, for example, Super is clearly not the first superannuation fund, not even close. But, the idea around transparency and making it easy for the user and focusing primarily on them is a different way to look at the problem and saying, right, this part of the problem hasn't been tackled before or hasn't been tackled well. We believe that based on who we are and the knowledge and experience we have, we can really target that part of the problem and solve that. So we're not expecting you to, invent something that nobody's ever even imagined before, because there's virtually nothing in the world ever comes out of pure imagination. Most things are a recombination of ideas from here and there that are put together. But at the same time, we would like there to be some sort of angle of actually, we've got an interesting way that we're trying to tackle this problem that is, unusual or uncommon, or that we just don't think somebody has done particularly well yet.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask any of our speakers? You can just write them in the chat, pop your hand up, whatever works. One from Sarah. How long does the selection process go for?
Great, Sarah. Let me I'll pull this up again and just share my screen. Sorry, give me one moment. Now it's in front of everything else.
It's always the way.
Yep, always the way. So just so that you can see it again, the application process, obviously applications are open now. The applications, including the 3-minute pitch, close on the 27th of February. So we'll then go through those in the subsequent week and invite people back for interviews on the 7th, 8th and 9th of March. And then based on those interviews, we'll announce the final cohort for the 11th of March with the sort of first introductory session, which is not really content. It's more about just getting to know people and getting to know what's expected throughout the program. Will be on the 24th of March with actual content delivery the week after that, which is, what's that, the 31st of March? So yes, we're trying to keep things nice and quick so that it's about 3 weeks from applications closing to a final answer for the final cohort with the interviews in between.
Great. We have a question in the chat. Do you want to take that one, Rory? You can read it out if you like. How competitive is the application process, i.e. how difficult is it to get accepted? What is your selection criteria based on? How many applications do you typically receive? And what percentage of the applicants typically are accepted? That's a great couple of questions there.
Yep. So obviously, in terms of the number of applications we get, it can depend. I think that most we've had has been sort of in the somewhere between 70 and 100 for the higher end of the spectrum in terms of the numbers of applications we've had. So sort of roughly for 35 places, I think we are this cohort. So about 50%. Our selection criteria are based on a combination of does the idea have traction? Does the team look like they're able to deliver on it? And the critical one that we actually really pride ourselves on being an important part of our selection criteria is, can we as MAP and Velocity actually help this team? So if we had a company come through that, you know, well ahead of everybody else, you know, they've really figured out a lot of their product market fit, you know, they're already getting you know, customers in the door, and you know, they just probably could use some advice on fundraising. Personally, I'd probably not accept them. I'd say, look, you know, you can find that advice from fundraising. We're happy to connect you through to someone who'll be able to give it to you, but you're going to be wasting 3/4 of your time coming through the Velocity program. And we'd rather use that place for someone who's actually going to be able to get benefit out of all of the content we deliver, rather than just, you know, 1 or 2 weeks of the content. So yes, it's competitive, but a key part of that is making sure that we're actually able to provide the best quality of support and content to the teams that come through.
Thanks, Rory. Manasik, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I did. So I'm a founder and we're just in the ideation phase, and I was wondering if there are any industries that MAP prioritizes?
Not explicitly. I mean, yes, you know, historically we've had a bit of a technology focus, and you know, obviously technology is very useful in terms of, you know, the reason that a lot of startups are able to get off the ground and scale and be successful in a short period of time is because of how they use a lot of the technology that's been developed in the last 10, 15 years. So usually, you know, we expect that there'll be some sort of technology component in there, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a technology solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in that, you don't necessarily need to be developing an entirely new piece of technology as part of it. It can just be, we are making sure that we are using this, you know, particular technology in order to deliver our particular business idea or business model more efficiently and more effectively. So I suppose short answer, no, we don't have any hard focus on particular areas. Does that answer the question?
It does, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we have a, let's have a look here. This says, so I'm crafting the action plan for my startup. When is the best time for a digital startup mobile app to join the Velocity program? So stops include Tram, Velocity, Accelerator, etc. So
depends a bit. For Velocity, again, so the core premise of Velocity is to help people find that early product market fit and really understand their customers in order to make sure that you're really addressing the customer needs. So usually what we see is a lot of companies who have figured out that there's something that they can do in a particular area, and it's, you know, there's an understanding or some experience that the founders have in that area, and they can say, I can see that there's a problem to be solved here. We're not 100% about what the answer will be, but you know, we have some ideas around it. We've you know, gone and started to talk to a couple of people about a particular solution, and they've received it pretty well. And what we'd like to do is start focusing on that solution and building that into a real product and a real service. And so how do we go about that? Who should we be talking to? How do we understand what they really need? Obviously, this can be a bit variable, but so Velocity, of course, is very early stage. So we're intentionally at the start of the process to try and help build that good foundation, such that once you've come through Velocity and you have a bit of time to then, you know, grow and develop on your own, that is the point in time where you'd then be focusing on subsequent accelerators like the MAP Accelerator itself or others around Victoria or Australia. Tram is a different case. The Tram for those who don't know, is a program that's run out of the University of Melbourne that's focused more on working with researchers at the university to help teach them some of the entrepreneurial skills. So unless you're a researcher or academic at the university, TRAM is actually not a suitable program. But basically, TRAM teaches many of the same things that you learn in Velocity or through the Accelerator program. It's just that it's targeted much more for researchers at the university who tend to be commercializing research that they've spent 20 years developing. So it's a sort of very different approach to a startup that uses a whole lot of the same sort of tools and techniques, but the different environment means that they have to be sort of treated separately.
Thanks, Rory. I have a question actually for Jack and Jeddi, something we haven't covered. What did you guys think of the mentoring, your experience with the mentoring?
So there is a pool of mentors. I did actually have one of the guest speakers as my mentor. So that was through, I guess, an external engagement with them prior. But I know that, from day one, they really encourage you to find, it's really up to you. Again, like this is coming back to, it is what you make it. They have they put all their contact details and everything out. And at the end of the day, it's part of you, I guess, being proactive to be like, hey, I would love to get some advice. And I know there's people who've scheduled like weekly catch-ups with them, but obviously just be really succinct in what is it you want to achieve? What are the questions that I have? And make sure that obviously you don't want to waste anyone's time, yours as much as theirs. So I know it's definitely beneficial to have a mentor to guide you through. I think it's always nice to have someone who's outside of your immediate group who probably knows the ropes a lot better than you do, through either their own journey or their in whatever field they're in. And so, they would definitely recommend either utilizing the mentors available within the program, or I think, for example, already you put in here, to potentially find a mentor before, let's say, like just in general, I think mentorship is a really good thing to have along your journey.
I found the mentors and that framework fantastic. Like Jeddi mentioned, I think for the external mentors at the university, that the program is developed, like they're obviously either founders themselves, or I spoke to a chap at PwC, and they're very busy, so you need to make sure that you're not wasting their time, and that you've got specific questions that you want to discuss, and that you can cover them quite in quite a quick manner. But the framework's there, the network's there, and I think the way I tended to go about it was utilize the office hours with Rory and the core team, and then they tend to understand that network and helped introduce me to people that were best placed in the wider community to help us. So I think mentor, like Jeddi said, it's really helpful to I got a number of mentors that I've sort of developed through my own journey and then through MAP, and you just build on that and keep them posted, and that's probably one of the most valuable things you can get out of the program, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Rory, did you want to handle these next couple of questions? Is there anything you want to add about the mentors? Someone's asked how do you go about finding?
Yep. So just to clarify, so Velocity, we have a group of mentors that we work with who are all experienced, as Jack was saying, as founders or as other professionals who have all sorts of knowledge and skills that are super useful for startup founders. So as part of the program, we will work to find you mentors as part of our group of mentors who have knowledge and skills that are applicable to the kinds of challenges that you're facing with your startup. In terms of projecting your idea, yes, we will, as part of the course content, cover intellectual property. Just for some background, I have a law degree that is in intellectual property, but I'm not a practicing lawyer, so certainly this is not legal advice. But my general advice around it is that most of the time, barring certain circumstances, you probably don't need to worry about intellectual property too much. Beyond perhaps a trademark, or if you're developing particularly new technology, a patent in those circumstances, broadly speaking, it's going to be more of a hassle than it's worth. And the simple reason is that the thing that I've heard so many times is a founder saying, I'm really worried that someone's going to steal my idea. And they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to share the challenges that they're facing or the problems that they're experiencing because they're worried that somebody else is going to steal that idea. And realistically, in my experience, what it boils down to is everyone is way too busy to steal your idea. They have their own idea that they're working on and their own problems that they're trying to solve. So there's no reason for them to come and try and steal your idea because they've got something else that they care about. But the other part of it is that in most cases, hard intellectual property is not what's going to protect your business. What's going to protect your business is having a competitive advantage. And so that might be the case of, you as a founder have a wealth of knowledge and experience in a particular field that it would take someone coming in from outside months or years to learn. And so that's your defensive moat, is that if someone wants to learn about your area, it will take them 6 months. So you've got at least 6 months head start on them. So most of the time, my general advice would be, of course, get a trademark because that secures your branding. But patent is probably only necessary if you're looking at a real serious hard technology solution. And copyright is more incidental. The real thing to focus on is having such a good competitive advantage that even if someone steals your intellectual property, you'll still beat them. So that's probably delving a bit more into the advice side of things than answering the question, but just because it's an area of my personal experience.
That was a great answer, Rory. Okay, are there any other questions before we wrap up the session? Probably got time for a couple more if there's any.
I've got one question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thanks to everyone. I think it's such an informative session today. I've got my own startup, and to be honest, I've been kind of purposefully staying away from incubators or accelerators, which for some reason I've thought would slow me down. But I guess actually on the flip side, they can probably speed me up and help me identify some blind spots. I've got one question, which is, out of the universe of kind of incubators and accelerators in Melbourne or in Australia, how do you think that MAP, or I guess more broadly, the university associated accelerators differ from other, I guess, private kind of accelerators?
So a key one for MAP in particular is that none of MAP's programs take equity. Mm-hmm. Whereas most of the commercial accelerators will in some form take a little bit of equity. And we genuinely see that as a key part of what we're trying to offer, is that we don't want to be sitting around and owning a part of your company. We're here to help you and to support you, because you can get some interesting situations where once someone has an equity stake in your company, you may have competing interests. And so there's a degree to which we've intentionally avoided taking equity in companies, because then we have no competing interest. Our interest is we're here to help you. And it doesn't. We're not here to just try and push you towards a particular exit to try and say, hey, try and grow as fast as you can so that we can get a return on our equity. That's not what we do, because we don't have any equity. So a big part of the differentiation in terms of being associated with the university is that we have the ability to focus very much on just being there to help the companies and to help the founders, rather than for any particular commercial outcome. Yeah, of course, we want to see you have a very successful commercial outcome, but we prefer to take more of the role of a genuinely trusted advisor and supporter, rather than an owner of your business. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a big difference. Thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Any more questions? Time for one more? No? Okay, wonderful. So I'd just like to extend a huge thank you to Jeddi and Jack for your sharing your journey and your insights with us this afternoon. Your generosity is very much appreciated by the Velocity team and by everyone who's joined us today, I'm sure. I'll share the slides from today along with a link to book office hours with Rory and also the recording of the session via email this afternoon. And yeah, with that, we'll wrap up the session. So thanks everyone for coming along. If you have any further questions, please feel free to shoot an email through to info@themap.co.
And just a final word from me, just please do reach out for office hours. I love talking about startups. I've been working with startups for 10 years. It's always exciting to hear what people are working on. Reach out and I'll see if I can help.
Thanks so much. Bye everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
Take care.